Okay, I'm about to do something I really never thought that I would do, and if it sounds like there's a snowblower in the background, that's because there is. We got a foot of snow last night, so I apologize for the background sound on this video, but yeah, moving on. I'm about to defend YouTube and the CEO of YouTube, Susan Wojcicki. Yes, that sounds ridiculous coming from me. I have so many complaints and criticisms of YouTube as a platform, it must seem absolutely absurd. But recently there was a segment on CBS 60 Minutes where Susan Wojcicki discussed YouTube's mission, and more specifically its policies regarding censorship and content removal, which needs to be analyzed. To get this out of the way right now, it was a legacy media hit piece. That's what the article was. This was a segment designed to push a particular narrative, meant to negatively portray both YouTube and its CEO, while pushing an agenda that, in this case, has dropped all pretense of objectivity and seeks to compel the deplatforming of any dissenting opinion present on YouTube as a whole. This is where it gets even worse. The definition of dissenting opinion has moving goalposts. Yesterday it was one thing, today it's another, and tomorrow who knows. In the CBS News segment, more than pretty much any other instance I have ever seen, at least in recent memory, these goalposts are perfectly framed. The agenda is simple. Wipe out all content that mainstream legacy corporations disagree with. Remove all competing news from visibility, remove conservative advertising, remove all messages that existing corporate media subjectively deem to be hateful, and prevent any content that could be perceived as hateful, controversial, or conspiratorial from the recommendation algorithm. The interview, understanding its premise of influencing a viewer's opinion towards a negative perception against YouTube and its policies regarding freedom of speech, is true to form for a classic hit piece. There are dozens of jump cuts, tiny out-of-context clips, segmented answers that lack any legitimate format because they've been butchered and respliced to push the agenda, and the result is an abomination of journalistic integrity that fails to maintain even a respectable pretense of objectivity or integrity and becomes full-blown dystopian authoritarian advocacy. I'll have the video linked down below, and there's a main 14-minute long segment and then a few overtime ones as well, all of which underline the now blatant attempt to just terminate anyone who legacy liberal media disagrees with. But in the interest of time and copyright, I'm fairly certain these garbage-ass companies are slobbering at the mouth to copyright claim videos by independent creators. I'll cut it down to some of the most relevant parts. Okay, so CBS immediately copyright claimed my previous upload for showing anything at all, but not just that, they blocked it outright on mobile platforms, and that's over 50% of YouTube viewership, so no wonder they're dying out, honestly. They are obviously pretty stupid, but yeah, so I'll be exact quoting or reading from the interview myself instead. But no matter how harmful or untruthful, YouTube can't be held liable for any content due to a legal protection called Section 230. Leslie Stahl, the interviewer, and I quote, "The law under 230 does not hold you responsible for user-generated content, but in that you recommend things, sometimes 1,000 times, sometimes 5,000 times, shouldn't you be held responsible for that material because you recommended it?" Susan replies, "Well, our system wouldn't work without recommending, and so if," Leslie interrupts her, "I'm not saying don't recommend, I'm just saying be responsible for when you recommend so many times." Susan, if we were held liable for every single piece of content that we recommended, we would have to review it. That would mean there would be a much smaller set of information that people would be finding. Much, much smaller. Then Leslie again, in her kind of narration tone, she told us that earlier this year, YouTube started reprogramming its algorithms in the US to recommend questionable videos much less and point users who search for that kind of material to authoritative sources, like news clips. With these changes, Wojcicki says they have cut down the amount of time that Americans watch controversial content by 70%. I'll brush past the fact that she brazenly acknowledges that there has been a 70% manipulation of subjectively controversial content viewing, and discuss that later on. This is honestly pretty self-explanatory. The accusation is YouTube dodges accountability by relying upon a legal protection called Section 230, which is true, but what it fails to acknowledge because of a prehistoric or flat-out delinquent perspective on modern culture is that the majority of the internet as we know it would not exist without Section 230. Section 230 simply prohibits an internet platform from being sued as a result of the content that users upload. If this were to be overturned, every social media would and could be sued into the ground over thousands, probably tens of thousands of separate instances where individual users disagreed, got into altercations, or were somehow influenced by one another. It goes even further. Without Section 230, any platform where users write messages, upload pictures, files, anything, that platform in its entirety would be at risk. And I don't feel confident naming a percentage here, but user-generated content facilitated by open or semi-open platforms account for a huge percentage of all online activity, period. This crusty, fossilized woman, advocating on behalf of a dying legacy corporate news outlet, is advocating directly for the destruction of modern internet infrastructure, because she and her corporate overlords are no longer capable of controlling the narrative and want to silence everyone they disagree with. There is a clear push for YouTube to promote authoritative sources. It is even outright said that they are already making that shift. But reading between the lines, even though you don't really have to because it's pretty much just flat out admitted, legacy media wants YouTube to get rid of anyone who is not them, deplatform dissenting opinions, and push all the traffic back to these relic, extremely biased outlets. The pretext for this is authority, but authority does not mean truth by default. And if you examine legacy media itself, you can see instances where a shotgun is fired on camera with a shell flying across the screen while it is referred to as an AR-15. Is that an authoritative source? There is the instance of ABC showing range footage from a Kentucky demonstration years ago and pretending it is literal war footage from Syria that their own journalists somehow obtained. Is that an authoritative source?
Take a look at this video used to shoot a watermelon using an AR-15.
To further demonstrate the biased component, here's another segment. YouTube also makes money from political ads, a thorny issue because some of them have been used to spread lies on social media. Leslie, Facebook is facing a lot of controversy because it refuses to take down a President Trump ad about Biden, which is not true. Would you run that ad? Susan, so that is an ad that right now would not be a violation of our policies. Leslie, is it on YouTube right now? Susan, it has been on YouTube. Leslie, can a politician lie on YouTube? Oh my God, this lady. Anyway, back on topic. Susan, for every single video, I think it's really important to look at it. Politicians are always accusing their opponents of lying. That said, it's not okay to have technically manipulated content that would be misleading. For example, there was a video uploaded of Nancy Pelosi. It was slowed down just enough that it was unclear whether or not she was in her full capacity because she was speaking in a slower voice. Susan again, the title of the video actually said drunk, had that in the title, and we removed that video. Leslie, how fast did you remove it? Susan, very fast, but not completely. We just did a search and there it was still available. The company keeps trying to erase the purported name of the impeachment whistleblower, but that too is still there, which raises doubts about their system's ability to cleanse the site. It is blatantly obvious the goal here is to remove conservative content. Political ads in almost every contemporary election on the planet contain manipulated material. This is true of both Democrats and Republicans, senators, congressmen, governors, even presidential races. Politicians, just like Susan said, they lie. They twist the truth, and they fabricate whatever narrative is best suited to their election or re-election. Among the weeds, sure, there are a few dedicated public servants who maintain their integrity, but the exception proves the rule. Most politicians lie or manipulate their political advertising, they make false promises, and are intentionally deceptive. CBS and this wrinkled skin bag of a human being directing the interview want Trump's content gone, and they want their own platform elevated. It's not because equal enforcement of truth would see just as many liberal ads removed from the site as it does conservative ones. It's about cleansing, by her own words, cleansing the site of Trump ads and content in general that diverges from the mainstream. This is a particularly dangerous perspective, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here or overly intense. How many times throughout history has a valuable, innovative, or revolutionary concept been pioneered, exposed, or uncovered by a fringe or unproven individual? In Israel, the Intelligence Committee has a 10th man principle. This is designed deliberately to compel a devil's advocate or contrarian perspective. The idea is, if there are 10 people in a room, the first 9 agree, it is the responsibility of the 10th to disagree while attempting to sway the others. When all dissenting opinions are silenced, when all 10 people agree, and when those 10 make it their mission to silence any further disagreement, criticism, or perspective that they deem to be unfit, well, let's just think back to when any voices that disagreed with a certain nation were silenced, because that's never gone bad. Probably a great idea for the liberal media to strive for total narrative control and deplatform anyone that they don't like in the US right before a massively controversial election. What could possibly go wrong? For another set of quotes, Leslie, President Trump has been advertising a lot on YouTube lately. Have you taken down any of President Trump's ads at all? Susan, there are ads of President Trump that were not approved to run on Google or YouTube. Leslie, do you have an example? Susan, well, they're all available in our transparency report. This is where the hypocrisy becomes untenable. To be extremely clear, in the coming presidential election here in the United States, I am evaluating Democratic candidates. I am on a personal level seeing if I want to vote for one of the Democratic potentials during the primaries. If I decide upon the candidate I support, still very unsure if I will even choose one, I will then vote for them in the primary, and if they win, I will vote in the general election. If they don't win, or if I don't find one that I support, I will abstain from the general election. This is not a promotional video for one side or the other. It is an analysis of legacy media delusion and its desperation to destroy anything in opposition. With all that said, this hypocrisy is untenable. While an impeachment inquiry is launched into the president for alleged election meddling, legacy media blatantly tries to pressure YouTube into pulling down presidential advertisements. Have you, taken down any of President Trump's ads at all? The subtext here is you should be taking down all his ads, but have you taken down any at all? The insinuation is that YouTube should be leveraging the platform in a decisively political way. For another set of quotes, Susan, you can go too far and that can become censorship. And so we have been working really hard to figure out what's the right way to balance responsibility with freedom of speech. But the private sector is not legally beholden to the First Amendment, and that was done in a narration voice. Leslie, you're not operating under some freedom of speech mandate. You get to pick. Susan, in reply, we do, but we think there's a lot of benefit from being able to hear from groups and underrepresented groups that otherwise we never would have heard from. But that means, again, this is in the narration voice, but that means hearing from people with odious messages about gays, women, and immigrants. Wojcinski explains that videos are allowed as long as they don't cause harm, but her definition of harm can seem narrow. Susan says, and I quote, so if you're saying don't hire somebody because of their race, that's discrimination. And so that would be an example of something that would be a violation against our policies. Leslie replies, but if you just said white people are superior by itself, that's okay. Susan says, and nothing else? Yes. And then the narrator voice again, but that is harmful in that it gives white extremists a platform to indoctrinate. Also in the really condescending narration voice, and what about medical quackery like turmeric can reverse cancer, bleach cures autism, vaccines cause autism? Once you watch one of these, YouTube's algorithm might recommend you to watch similar content. Before continuing, as an afterthought, I added this in postscript, there is an outright condemnation here of the homeopathic remedy market. Many people seek alternative treatments to cancer in the face of overwhelming doubt and concern and fear. They may seek traditional and non-traditional treatment. There are thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people who attest to and swear by various home treatments. I would say that bleach is obviously a dangerous chemical, yeah, for sure, but many home remedies are harmless, if unproven, I guess, and they provide even just a positive placebo effect for minor issues. They can have tremendous value. This is, to its very core, the promotion of censorship and control that extends so far past the realm of reason, it is sickening. This woman is advocating for blanket deletion of content on a massive scale because she and her puppeteer masters disagree with a certain few instances of its usage while feeling threatened as their market share of information control rapidly deteriorates. This is where we have to apply some common sense. Without explicitly acknowledging bias, it creates an implication of equal enforcement. What I mean by that is if a white person says white people are superior and it then gets stricken down, unless we are officially acknowledging that different treatment as a function of race is acceptable, which by every claim it is not, it would mean that any race says X race is superior, it would need to be stricken down. Now picture what that looks like, an overarching platform for user self-expression, but no individual or any race is ever allowed to express the opinion that their own race is superior. To be 100% clear, I believe we're all just making our own way through life. It's a hamster wheel and we're all on that same hamster wheel together, just different colored hamsters, but anyone who holds a different viewpoint for any reason applicable to whatever race without admitting total and irreconcilable hypocrisy would need to be censored and shut down. Now imagine, where does the line get drawn? Does the line stop at race, or does it extend to sexuality? Does it stop there, or does it extend to nationalism in general? Is the expression of my country is the best and better than all other countries a statement that must be censored to protect the authoritative sources? Since YouTube is a global platform, imagine the ramifications of that extension, and that's just the beginning. Mainstream legacy media wants everything that they disagree with stricken from the platform. That much is obvious. But the problem is, when you start subjectively, even arbitrarily picking and choosing what can and cannot be said based on flavor of the month, social justice, and liberal pandering, you accept an ever-shifting set of guidelines where clarity and security cannot exist. 60 years ago, the social tune had very different notes, and we all like to sit here and think that what it is now is the right way, and the agenda we personally fight for is the right one, and everyone who disagrees with us is prejudiced. But the truth is, the same mentality existed historically just the same in the most horrific of social environments. It matters just as much how you fight for an agenda as it does what the agenda actually is. Think of it this way. One of the war cries shouted by truly prejudicial people, not prejudiced like, everyone who isn't coming to the anti-Trump rally with me is for sure a Nazi, but like actual hateful people. One of their war cries is that their voices are being removed, censored, stripped away, and shut down. Now, when you legitimately do all of those things, and giant corporations call for it in blanket, generalized fashion to be weaponized against their financial and political competitors on a user-generated platform that used to be all about freedom of speech and freedom of expression for individuals, what result will that have? The only result is vindication. Everything these people have claimed is coming true, and the ignorant, infantile perspective of we need to deplatform everyone who has a hateful message, even though what's hateful changes every day and none of us can even keep up anymore, only serves to strengthen their position. Pepe the Frog has now been claimed as an alt-right image despite being around as an internet joke long before that narrative. The OK hand gesture, a sign that has existed with a verifiable meaning for generations? Nope. That's about white power too. Better ban it at conventions. The delusion is palpable, and this latest interview from CBS merely signifies that it's only picking up steam. In one of the final clips for CBS Overtime, Susan says the following. Leslie, 230 says you can't be sued for things that appear on your platform, so you have this huge protection. I know it allows you to run things, but look at all the things we've talked about that do get on your platform, that have been harmful. Susan replies, which we're removing, which we've been working on, and honestly, if there was laws that said this is the type of content you can't have, then we would remove it. Just to be clear, because you've asked me so many questions about hate, that's not necessarily something that we're getting any kind of legislation about. That's allowed. That's allowed here in the United States, and we are making a decision to be responsible because we think it's important for our society right now, and we're allowed to do that because of Section 230. And so the government is free to say, hey, this is how you should enforce hate, this is how you should enforce harassment. We would follow those laws, but we don't see those laws. Those laws aren't out there right now. This is where it becomes very clear. YouTube already polices user content and subjectively terminates or deplatforms, but this interview, just like my own with a snake from CNET a number of months ago, was a hit piece to smear YouTube and Susan Wojcicki. The questions about hate were asked over and over because her answers didn't matter. The goal was to get enough sound bites to splice together something that made YouTube seem like it was facilitating hate speech, and then draw the connection between hate speech and censorship. The interview even goes so far as to self-acknowledge that this is all subjective, and when you choose to destroy the core and evenly enforced principle of freedom, instead opting to selectively enforce who can and cannot speak, and what they can and cannot say, which was literally what this woman said at various points, you are not just walking down a dangerous path, you are balls out sprinting.
And of course, harmful is in the eye of the beholder, trying to curb harmful speech on their site.
The final dot to connect, which is basically said flat out, so you don't even have to really connect it, is that freedom of speech on YouTube, and by extension as a result of the focus on Section 230, the whole internet, should not exist. Conservative viewpoints should be deplatformed, independent creators should not be promoted, authoritative sources like CBS and other legacy media should be promoted, and YouTube has a responsibility to regulate what users say on the site, so long as those lies come from legacy media or liberal viewpoints, they're okay. All I see is a crusty old woman complaining about the existence of opinions that she disagrees with, but not in a harmless way, like, oh, those darn contrarians or conspiracy theorists, in a malicious, pointed, and deliberate way with an ultimate goal of having those individuals be stripped of their ability to even voice said opinions. That is archaic, detrimental, and pathetic. I never thought I would defend YouTube or Susan Wojcicki, never in a million years, and I still have a lot of complaints with how things are handled, generally speaking, but good on them for standing up to the regressive garbage that CBS is clearly trying to push. And while they have obviously caved in somewhat under the pressure of legacy media, I guess I appreciate the fact that they haven't yet literally turned into a point-for-point replica of George Orwell's 1984. That's it for today. Legacy media lies to you all the time. They lie to me all the time. They lie to all of us all the time. But since they are an authoritative source, I guess those lies are okay. But anything they don't like, those lies have to be cleansed. Literally, her word, cleansed from the site. If you want to support, there are links down below. Twitter, Patreon, merch, that kind of thing. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.